Joining us now for our brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning, Dr. Ruben. How are you doing? I'm okay. Good morning, Niall.
Good morning,
Rufai.
Fair me, fair.
That's me.
Mate.
That's me.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Let me tell you what's happening around the world. Well, let's begin in the United States, which has been confronted with a national security crisis after top national security officials for President Donald Trump, including his defense secretary, texted war plans for upcoming military strikes in Yemen to a group chat in a secure messaging app that included the editor-in-chief for The Atlantic. Now, Jeffrey Goldberg, the journalist in question, reported the messages on the thread on Signal app, and he said it included details of upcoming strikes on Houthi rebels in Yemen, including information about targets, weapons the US would be deploying, and attack sequencing. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Group chat, is that how you saw it?
No, that's a lie. He was texting war plans. He was texting attack plans. When targets were going to be targeted, how they were going to be targeted, who was at the targets, when the next sequence of attacks were happening. I didn't publish this, and I continue not to publish it because it felt like it was too confidential, too technical, and I worry, honestly, that sharing that kind of information in public could endanger American military personnel. But no, they were plans for the attack.
Also said that he was added to the message change, apparently by accident, after receiving a connection request from someone who appeared to be a White House National Security Advisor, Michael Waltz. Now, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has criticized Goldberg and called him a deceitful and highly discredited journalist, and said that this is what essentially said that he was lying. But in response to these claims, this is what Donald Trump had to say.
I don't know anything about it. I'm not a big fan of The Atlantic. To me, it's a magazine that's going out of business. I think it's not much of a magazine, but I know nothing about it. You're saying that they had what?
They were using Signal to coordinate on sensitive materials and
Having to do with what? Having to do with what? What were they talking about?
with the Houthis.
The Houthis? You mean the attack on the Houthis?
Correct.
Well, it couldn't have been very effective because the attack was very effective. I can tell you that. I don't know anything about it. You're telling me about it for the first time.
You've got to be switched on when you're asking the president questions, because you might ask him a question, he might respond with something completely different, but we'll come back to that. Now, we remember the closure of Heathrow Airport last week. Well, a body representing more than 90 airlines around the world, including British Airways and Virgin Atlantic, using Heathrow Airport, say that there might be a case for legal action if a settlement over the costs incurred from Friday's closures after a fire is not reached. Now, Europe's largest airport, which is of course Heathrow, was closed in the early hours of Friday morning after a blaze at a major electricity substation hit electricity supplies in nearby Hayes. Now, no planes were allowed to take off or land, causing diversions which affected about 1,300 flights and roughly 250,000 passengers. Now, the chief executive of Heathrow Airline Operators Committee, a man named Nigel Wicking, said it was appalling that airlines had to wait until midnight on Friday to confirm that Terminal 2 would open on Saturday morning, adding that the situation was not justifiable given the amount of money that has been spent on Heathrow over the years and the fact that it is the most expensive airport in the world. Essentially saying it's not good enough. I do think that situations like this, sometimes you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Heaven forbid, had they not taken the decision to close the airport and something disastrous happened, then there would be criticism. Why didn't you shut down the airport? Why didn't you protect these people? Now that they have shut down the airport, questions about, did you need to? Did it need to be closed for that long? To be honest, even on the World Brief, we discussed about how this effective ban on takeoffs or landings would be until midnight the following day. So it was known from that point, but I can imagine that many airline operators are having to face criticism from their own customers, perhaps requests for refunds, people whose plans have completely been thwarted. I saw a lady on social media said that she was supposed to fly to her own wedding, and that was disrupted. So you can imagine that, it did affect a lot of people.
No, so I don't know what the terms will be with the airlines, and that's why I think that story put a caveat there that if they don't reach an amicable settlement.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an instance. I was in America in January. I was flying out to England, and there was a storm. The weather situation was bad. They told me frontally that because of this kind of storm, we will not give compensation, we'll not give hotels and everything. What we can just do is to get you regular flight updates. So I don't know if the people will be able to claim, since it was an extra situation. I mean, it was a fire station. It wasn't that it was any fault of the airlines.
Right.
And I think what they're also fighting for is, but I don't know, they might be able to claim, they might not be. But what they're also fighting for is the miscommunication. The fact that the communication came in too late and there was the indecision process. But as at that time too, it was an active case of investigation.
This is it.
Some people were touting terrorism, some people were touting all sorts of things. They didn't know what had happened because it was an extra situation, something that happened at a fire station, at a power station close by. So it's a chicken and egg situation, but I think they will be able to resolve it amicably. There goes Trump again with his recklessness and pivoting and a lot of lies. There's no how he didn't know about it, that there was a leak. Obviously, he would have gotten security briefings while the Atlantic, wrote about it. But it's quite shocking, that the same Trump that kept on shouting, lock Hillary Clinton up because she was using the allegation that was using personal emails to conduct government business on a personal server, is the same one under his government officials are conducting high-stakes security sensitive matters on Signal, which is not hosted on American private government server, but on a server of who you don't know who. And there were no checks and balances on this server, on Signal, that you purportedly sent a message to a journalist without checking. He snooped in on all the conversation, got all the details, published it in Atlantic. Anyway, there's a bipartisan...
corroborated by fact, what he saw in terms of the Yemen attack did in fact
forget
happen.
what Hegseth is saying. Hegseth, by now, if America was sane and Trump is really a sane president, Hegseth should be losing his job by now. No matter all the abuses he's raining on Goldberg and all that, he should be losing his job. Anyway, there's a bipartisan appeal. Republicans and Democrats in the House are saying this must be investigated. We must see the very end of it. I mean, they should do better. So what if that situation are leaked to the hands of China? The fact that an American government do not even have a private communication server, that they had to use Signal in the first place, is shambolic and reflective of how low America has gone.
All right, it's like a movie. I actually read the man in question's article in The Atlantic, and say what you may by President Trump ignoring or dismissing it as a soft sell tabloid, he doesn't really work on with it. It was shocking, especially because of the sensitivity of the conversations. And so, just from a lay perspective, before I even go in, I just thought to myself, when you have a congregation like this, one of the first things I do when I'm invited to a WhatsApp or social media platform is to check the people who are there.
Right.
So even though there was no check done, then there was a point where they all introduced themselves and spoke about where they were not concerned that somebody with a strange name didn't introduce himself. J.D. Vance is also someone that should come under question, aside from Pete Hegseth. He was there and was quite vocal in the meeting, and we read the accounts. Thankfully, I think it was Floodgate, is that his name, didn't reveal some of the sensitive things that were discussed, and that was wise.
Yes.
Yeah, even though Goldberg, thank you. Even though he was, he had that would have been an issue of national security.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But it just goes to show the security protocol and the failings. And I remember when the headline came out, it was like, no, impossible.
Right.
This has to be a false story. It couldn't be. And then you see how easy it was for them to... How did they even invite someone like that to a Signal conversation unknowingly, and then have such an important conversation over that kind of network that is not, government protected? It's embarrassing, to say the least, for the president. And I know he's trying to save face, but I think this would also bring up conversations around protocols for security and conversations such as this. And then with Heathrow, I talked about this yesterday a little, but one of the things that also said, the chairman of the National Grid is now they're trading blames. He's saying that there were 2 other substations that were available, and that's why they're complaining, that Heathrow didn't need to shut down. Yes, one major substation, which had undergone a fire, wasn't working, wasn't supplying energy, but they had other substations that would have been sufficient to power up Heathrow. So why did they have to close down Heathrow? An investigation has been instituted. We'll see what's happened. We'll see where the gaps are. Yeah. But definitely, like I said yesterday, that it's going to open up perhaps policy direction or new guidelines for how protocols in such situations. This is the United Kingdom we're talking about. This is Heathrow we're talking about. It's a security facility. So it's definitely cause for concern.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll run through the 2 subjects very quickly. Now, Republicans are filled with shock and horror. The international community is also filled with shock and horror. Yep. and Republicans in Senate and elsewhere are asking for an investigation. And they are asking specific questions. Why would classified information, data, be transmitted on an open messaging app that belongs to a private non-profit? Why would Peter Hegseth be sending messages in that kind of open channel? We're told that it was Mike Walls. That has not been established. Maybe the investigations will establish that. That added the journalist, the editor-in-chief of the Atlantic. That's Goldberg. 3, will there be consequences for this kind of behavior? Ordinarily, there should be firings, for breaching national security. What is it that was breached? Attacks, planned attacks on Houthi rebels in Yemen and along the Suez Canal. And all of that was just put into the hands of a journalist at the Atlantic. Now, that again is a very serious breach. Now, the journalist Goldberg, yes, we were told removed himself after I discovered that this was a breach. But he still went ahead to write an article about it, causing the administration, serious embarrassment.
Yes.
The question here is, what you don't want a journalist to know, don't tell him. Don't come and meet journalists, or you talk to journalists, or you send messages, and you say, oh, Chatham House rule. That journalist will still find a way of, revealing the information in this amebo business that we are doing, because it's an amebo profession.
No, that's not true.
It is true.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
It is true.
There are journalists that hold state secrets.
But
You hold a lot of state secrets, and you're a journalist, and you've not revealed everything in the government.
No.
Yeah.
That's a different thing. I served in government in a different capacity.
Well, you're a journalist now.
No. It's not everything a hunter sees in the forest.
Just like
that he comes home
most
to say.
journalists do.
No, journalists don't keep secrets.
Yeah, journalists.
Anyway, but quickly, the irony. The same Trump that was attacking Hillary Clinton is now saying, oh, Atlantic is a failed magazine, I don't read them. And then to the issue of Heathrow. Well, what the 90 airlines led by Virgin Atlantic, yes, and also other airlines are saying, their CEO, the man you quoted, Weekend, that's his name, he's saying that if there is settlement, if they are compensated for costs running into over 20 million pounds, for each airline perhaps, in terms of how they had to treat the passengers, that maybe there will be no litigation. But that if they are not compensated, they may have to go to court. But there are issues about Woodby, the CEO of Heathrow. That man, first, the man went home when the incident of the fire outage, electricity outage occurred, and handed over to his deputy.
There we go.
When he came back, the question is also being asked, why did he shut down the airport? Yeah. 3, he's saying that, they had to shut down because they had to reboot, their computer system, and that will take time. 4, they are also asking him, look, what have you done, in line with all of what has happened? Right. And that's why the transport secretary is not outrightly supporting him. She is just saying, oh, okay, there was outage, they needed to reboot, yes, their system. But the bigger part of it is that many suffered. And even on Friday, he didn't show up. On Saturday morning, he didn't show up early.
He didn't go to the fireside to make sure everybody was okay. Please, we don't know what he was doing. We don't know where he went. Let's move on to the newspapers. Let's start, of course, in Nigeria with This Day. This Day does lead with former President Olusegun Obasanjo saying democracy has failed in Africa. And Peter Obi chiming in saying that it is collapsing here in Nigeria. Now, Minister of Information separately, Mohammed Idris, does say that President Tinubu will soon end the state of emergency in Rivers as normalcy has been restored. The Daily Sun leads with the accusation from former President Obasanjo that members of the National Assembly allegedly received bribes to ratify the state of emergency imposed on Rivers State by the President. Now, his allegation follows an earlier denial by the chairman of the House Committee on the Federal Capital Territory, Mukhtar Betara, who dismissed claims that cash payments were made to lawmakers to secure support for the emergency declaration. The New Telegraph, however, leads with with the president of the Nigeria Labour Congress, Joe Ajaro, who is cautioning state governments not to frustrate the implementation of the Supreme Court judgment that directed local governments to open accounts with the Central Bank of Nigeria to receive their allocations directly. And with the latest on these Naira for crude talks, the Punch reports that refiners may spend about 1.43 billion monthly on the importation of crude oil into Nigeria. The plants may spend this much amid the uncertainty surrounding the sustainability of the Naira for crude policy between the NNPC and the Dangote refinery, coupled with concerns about the domestic crude supply obligation of the federal government. Now, on the top right corner of the Daily Independent, there's a headline which states that suspended Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan has vowed never to apologize to the Senate. But I mean, it is a bit of a tricky headline because when you read the article itself, it goes on to clarify that Senator Akpoti-Uduaghan denied already existing claims that she apologized to the Senate. That being said, INEC has received a petition to recall the Kogi Central Senator and declare her seat vacant. The Guardian dedicated its front page to Nigeria's abandoned 50 billion naira floating dock. Its headline says more than 1,000 Nigerian vessels rely on Ghana and other countries for routine maintenance. Moving on to the United Kingdom, and the Daily Telegraph has a debate over free speech. And it's been sparked after Charlie Mullins, who is the owner of Pimlico Plumbers and a multi-millionaire backer of reform, was threatened with being stripped of his OBE over a social media attack on London Mayor Sir Sadiq Khan. Now, the Secretive Honours Forfeiture Committee first accused Charlie Mullins of bringing the honours system into disrepute back in September over comments he made back in 2022. Now, they said that they were minded to recommend to His Majesty that his OBE be revoked. This is Charlie Mullins, accused Sir Keir Starmer of a political revenge attack. And finally, the Financial Times has President Donald Trump issuing an executive order declaring that any country buying oil or gas from Venezuela will pay a 25% tariff on trades with the United States. This is while his administration has extended a deadline for US producer Chevron to wind down operations in the South American country. Just another example of the irony on display with this administration. Those are your papers from around the world.
Well, thank you very much.
Always.
Varied, a variety of stories there. So many things to read further about. The newspapers have been mentioned for those who would like more details on that. Thank you so much, Adefemi.